Welcome to the folklore, myth, and magic of the elder tree. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to this series of videos on the folklore, myth, and symbolism of various trees, various sacred trees from Britain and Ireland. And this time, the elder tree. My friends, a very interesting tree, this one, very rich in folklore and symbolism. It's a very dual-natured tree, this. It has very positive aspects and very negative ones, and the two kind of tie together. I guess the main takeaways from this tree, the elder tree, is the elders, the old ones, the wisdom of age, and of course, with old age also comes death. So death is one of the associations of this tree. Also, fairy, the fairy realm, the others, also including the underworld, the otherworld, the subconscious, the inner realm. This is also a very feminine tree. It's strongly related to the idea of the sacred feminine, particularly the third aspect, virgin, mother, crone. So crone energy, the wisdom of the grandmother, but also the shadow aspect of the crone, which is, of course, the witch. So strongly associated with witchcraft in the folklore, this tree. Before we get onto any of that, though, and I'd like to tell you a particular story from the folklore that really sort of illustrates this connection with witchcraft, a few practical things about the elder. The wood is not very good. Sorry, lovely, it's true. It's not very good for timber anyway. It's not very strong. It's quite soft and spongy. It's quite brittle. It will break. It also makes for very, very poor firewood. In fact, it's considered very unlucky to burn it. Either it will put your fire out, or it might even summon the devil, who will come and sit on your roof and come down the chimney like some sort of rapey Santa. So poor firewood, poor construction material, but it does have practical uses. If you look at this stem here, which is actually cut from this tree, always important to ask permission of a tree before you cut it, particularly an elder. If you look at the profile of this branch here, you'll see that there is quite a large pith running through it. Now it's very, very easy to just sort of hollow that out. Look, I'm doing so now. And you can make a tube with a hole all the way through it. This historically has been used for a range of things. It's thought that the very first panpipes may have been made from elder, with blowgun, beads. You cut it into lots of cylinders to string on a necklace. Also, for kindling fire. So you've got a pipe to blow from to kindle fire, which may be one reason why in English it's called the elder tree. Eld is a word for kindle or blaze in Old English. So nothing actually to do with elders at all. Just an interesting synchronicity of language there. Medicinally as well, this tree is packed with benefits, some of which are actually to do with the fact that it is poisonous, so dual-natured there as well. We've all seen these trees in early summer. In fact, it's often said of this tree that it flowers at the beginning of summer and its berries are at the end of summer, Samhain. So it's a tree of beginnings and ends there. It's in flower at Beltane, the bright fire, and its berries are out in Samhain. So traditionally, the bark or inner bark of this tree would have been used as a purgative, literally making you shit and vomit so much and raising the temperature in your body that you expel any disease or illness. But could be one of the reasons also why it's called the fire tree, raising the heat in the body to expel unwanted illnesses. That ties into the psychology and mythos and symbolism of this tree very, very well, giving you suffering to bring about a better result. You can also make tinctures and things from the berries and leaves that again cause you to bring on a sweat that clears out your sinuses and your nasal cavities, sweating out a fever. So that is an example of a poisonous quality of the tree that is also a curative. Interesting symbology there, as well as practical use. Also, I'm sure we all know elderflower blossom. makes a wonderful cordial and a wonderful drink, either in a tea form or as a kind of mix with sparkling water. I used to make loads of this when I was a kid. I remember, collecting the elder blossoms and making it into cordial. So lots and lots of gifts this tree has in terms of like botanics and botanical uses, really giving tree. So that's some of the positive grandmotherly gifts that this tree gives us. So these historic and practical uses do of course feed into the folklore and the symbolism. In the Stone Age, in the Mesolithic, we find a lot of stone axes in grave burials that are obviously grave burials that are shaped like an elder leaf, which could be a very, very ancient association of this tree with death. So yes, the symbolism here, the idea of death leading to renewal. One of the first videos I made on this channel was on the birch tree, which is a very interesting sister tree to this in many aspects. Both trees are very short-lived, about 60 to 90 years, really short-lived for a tree, but it puts it on a human life scale. The birch tree is often associated with the maiden in that threefold division of the sacred feminine: Virgin, Mother, Crone. The Virgin, new life, the bride, St. Bridget, with the new year, new hope of New Year's growth. This tree, by contrast, is the end of the year. It's associated with Samhain, with the winter solstice, with death, out of which comes rebirth. Out of death comes regeneration. Look at the tree. Look at the way it regenerates. It kind of regenerates from any part. So this symbolism is supported by biology. I always love that kind of thing. And probably because the biology influenced very, very early animistic belief systems, which gradually became the folklore of centuries later, and the symbolism and the story. Just while we are on the subject of the birch tree in relation to the elder tree, traditionally it is said that you will make a baby's crib out of birch because of the symbolism and folklore associated with that tree will protect the child in its journey. For more info on that symbolism, see my birch tree video. Conversely, it is said that you should not ever make a child's basket or crib out of elder wood, because if you do, the child will be pinched black and blue by the fairies, or maybe even swapped for a changeling and taken away to some fairy realm or underworld. So another connection there with kind of endings and new beginnings there, and a kind of relationship between elder and birch, the tree of endings and the tree of beginnings, new beginnings. It's interesting that in the Ogham, this comes at the end of the particular group of letters that the elder sits in. Immediately preceding it is the blackthorn. I've made a video about blackthorn, but all about life's hard lessons, strife. So therefore, it's fitting that this comes after blackthorn, if you think about it, because it's all that pain, all that suffering, all those lessons are coming to fruition now, and this is the end of them, waiting for the new beginning. Birch tree. That's the symbolism that some people place on it. Anyway, it's hard to say exactly how old all of this is. Speaking of historicity of these things and the Ogham, the elder tree has been associated with this letter since at least the medieval era, since those scholastic texts which ascribed every Ogham tree, every Ogham letter, a particular tree. This might also be a very, very ancient thing going right back to the beginning. Clearly it is with some of them, like the oak tree, but just not all of them necessarily. Ruis stands for the letter R in the Ogham, and this doesn't mean elder tree. It means sort of to do with red, to do with the colour red, which is interesting. And the kennings are to do with blushing, blood in the face, being quick to anger, emotion, which sort of makes sense with the symbolism and the folklore, like we'll see. But it is interesting. There's nothing particularly red about this tree, except the berry stalks are very red, and the elderberry cordial is very red. So maybe for that reason. But I can think of other trees that I would give the name red to, like the rowan, which also literally means red. Why the elder? So that's what sort of just makes a little question mark over some of the tree associations with the Ogham. We don't know quite how old they are, or if some medieval monk just went, I don't know what to put with this letter, Ruis. The elder, that'll probably do. Kind of makes sense. Or that monk might have been basing that decision based on oral, intangible culture that is now lost to us. So it's very valuable that we have that association. Because this tree is a tree of endings and the underworld, it's often also associated with Saturn, or the Greek Kronos, god of time, god of order, god of endings, god of rules. You shall not avoid the rules unless it's Christmas time. So Saturn, also the god of underground wealth, uh, in a similar way to kind of Pluto or Hades, similar, have some crossovers, these deities, don't they? In folklore, then, I've already hinted at this being a tree of the end of summer, the beginning of winter, that doorway time, the end, the death, and then the new beginning. This idea is exemplified in the story of the Cailleach, the old woman, the spirit of winter. Cailleach, literally an archetypal image of the crone, as well as an embodiment of winter. So strong connection with the elder here. In some of the stories of the Cailleach, who is the embodiment of winter that's coming, she turns into the bride, the new embodiment of spring that comes the next year, year on year on year in the cycle. This is in some ways quite a recent piece of folklore, but with very ancient roots to it. I've told this story on this channel. It's normally associated with Imbola, the birth of the when hope is in the belly underground. Um, so you could associate this tree with the Cailleach, crone energy, but with the seed of new growth within. It's interesting, in Scotland, a lot of the folklore of this tree is to do with buried treasure. Again, Saturn, wealth underground, also the subconscious, the realm of the subconscious. In some of these stories, maybe some thieves are sleeping under an elder tree and have a dream that there is a chest of gold under, and they dig it up, and sure enough, they find the gold, but then disaster and misfortune starts to befall them. Terrible things begin to happen until they replace the chest of gold under the tree, and then their fortune starts going right again. So it's interesting little twist of the vengeful tree sort of archetype in folklore, that when you replace the gold, the bad things stop happening. I said at the beginning, this is a fairy tree, so it is said of elder. There's a lot of the same pieces of folklore that are also said of the hawthorn, another strong fairy tree, another strong hedgerow tree. Like the hawthorn, there's a lot of, in my video on the hawthorn, there's a lot of stories about the hawthorn where a farmer or landowner cuts down a fairy tree and the fairies ruin his life. His house and barns burn down. He's ruined. We get those stories with the elder, but with a crucial difference. If the farmer plants a new elder tree in replacement, regeneration, new growth, the bad things stop happening. So in a way, the elder seems like it's got a bit more kindness and compassion and understanding. So another way that this is sort of, within the bad stuff, there's a seed of good. There's a dual aspected here, very dual aspected tree. Another link with fairy folklore and the elder tree. It is often said that if you fall asleep underneath an elder tree in bloom on Midsummer's Eve, then you will be whisked away to the fairy realm, and they'll show you all sorts of wonderful things. And you'll see the fairy queen and the fairy king and a great many wonders, a la Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, where we have, of course, the fairy Puck, and many visions and revels. So a lot of this fairy association with the elder tree. So not all negative. Some positive associations here as well. I do love this tree in summer. Just you can smell the scent of it on the breeze on Midsummer's Day. When I was in Avebury around Midsummer this year, you could see in all the hedgerows all the elder trees just left alone by farmers. Maybe superstition or maybe respect. Who knows? But you don't always see that, the elder trees actually being left when a farmer is clipping a hedgerow. But I suppose Avebury is a special kind of place. A lot of the folklore is more positive around Europe. In Denmark and Germanic and Scandinavian countries, we have the idea of Hildemor, again in Danish, the elder tree mother. This is recorded perhaps most famously in a story by Hans Christian Andersen, where a young boy is given an infusion of elderflowers and is taken on a magical journey by the kindly spirit of the elder mother tree. I have a problem as a folklorist with Hans Christian Andersen because he made a lot of his stories up, but not all of them. A lot of them were based on pre-existing Danish or Scandinavian folklore, as I believe is the case with this one, because we have other instances of this sort of story around Germanic Europe of the elder tree mother. So more of the benevolent, grandmotherly aspects of the sacred feminine associated with this tree in other parts of Europe. In Britain and Ireland, we get a bit of that, but we get a bit more of the witchcraft elements. So this is sort of one of the main takeaways about the elder tree. It's strongly associated with cunning women and cunning men, but cunning women, and also their negative aspect, the witch, the sorcerer, one who does dark magic, basically. There's so many stories about witches turning into elder trees as they're familiar. In one of them, a man is going walking with his son and cuts a elder tree stick like this for a walking stick for his son, but he didn't ask the tree's permission, clearly, because when he cut it, the tree bled, and they were both quite spooked about that. And then when they got to the next village, there was a woman with a bleeding arm standing by a bridge. In other stories, maybe a farmer will want to get rid of the tree, cut it down, and it'll go and start moving, uproot itself, and chase him across the field until, again, he crosses running water, because witches can't cross running water. Another association of the elder tree with witchcraft, historical witchcraft and folk magic and sorcery, is the use of the elder tree wood, in Ireland this is, as a witch's broomstick, or to do with flying magic. Usually there's a few theories about witches' broomsticks and flying, but that imagery is usually thought to come out of the use of flying potions, which are historical potions with many different ingredients that simulate the idea of going on a soul flight, almost like a shamanic journey, you might say. Usually physically in woodcuts and things like that, witches are seen flying around on broomsticks physically, but this is probably a more of a spiritual journey, like a shamanic trip. One of the ingredients of these flying potions, according to some, is muscarine from the fly agaric mushroom, which usually grows under birch trees. Another interesting correlation between the elder and the birch here. But muscarine, typically, I've never had a successful visionary episode with muscarine. It just sort of makes my legs turn to jelly. But many people report very clear visions and trips of flying. So this could have been one of the elements of flying potions. It also makes you extremely nauseous and sometimes sort of paralyzed. So you don't normally ingest it directly. You normally apply it in interesting ways. The shamans of Siberia would drink it via the medium of a reindeer and drink the reindeer's piss, so they didn't get all the negative effects but just the hallucinogenic ones. Another way is to apply it physically or bodily to you. And some suggest that it is applied to the maybe the thin skin around the temples or around the genitals. So this could be one of the origin of broomsticks as a ritual implement. It could be a way to apply this flying ointment to the genitals, maybe even with elder by kind of applying it that way to one another, which could obviously lead to all sorts of kind of sexual orgiastic stories about these witches' sabbats, which may be based on a misunderstanding of applying a certain spiritual medicine to the genitals of your fellow witch. Just an idea, just something to think about. Obviously, in British witchcraft, there's many types of wood that flying broomsticks can be made from in the historical period. Another association with witchcraft from Britain and Ireland is that if you're going to do some weather magic, type of sympathetic magic, you might stir a cauldron of water with an elder stick, and then that would stimulate the atmospheric regions into making a big old storm. typical sympathetic magic, but it's recorded in the historical period that elder sticks might be used in those kind of magical spells. So another association with the elder tree and sorcery there. So lots of stories about elder trees and witches. Possibly the most famous one is this one, which is lovely because it has a bit of detail. There was once a farmer, and he had a small bit of land with some good solid hedgerows, but no big trees and no elder. People didn't like elder in that part of the world. Now, this farmer, he was a poor man and he had a few cows, but he did good with them and they made good milk and it was sort of famous around. And he made enough of a living and a name for himself from these few cows. But one day it became clear to the farmer that someone was milking his cows without his permission. They were being milked in the night. And it was hurting his profits, and he didn't have a lot of money, so he couldn't really afford to spare the loss. Now, one night, his cows were sort of they were mooing in an odd way that the farmer didn't recognise, and he knew his cows' moos very well. And it was dark, mind, fire was in the grate. His family had had their supper. It was dark, and he went out, in the moonlight to check on his cows. They were up in the top pasture, up in the top field, like up here. And he went and saw the dark shapes of his cows in the moonlight, and they were sort of lowing and mooing. And then he saw, in the middle of the field, there was an elder tree. And there was not, he knew every step of his farm, and there was not a tree there in the middle of the field earlier today, let alone an elder tree. So the farmer, was a bit, he wasn't really a superstitious man, but he was a bit spooked by this. So he gathered up his cows, called them and herded them from the top field down into the home pasture where he could keep an eye on them from his farmhouse. So he was driving them through the pasture, and then an odd thing, he was driving them into the little small paddock, and he went to close the gate, but someone had taken the rope away from the gate. It was there before today, but someone had removed it. Someone was playing silly buggers, thought the farmer. But no matter, because he found a big sort of rock and sort of rolled that and pushed it up against the gate, and then climbed over it and went back in and told his wife all of this. And his wife, who was a bit more superstitious, said, "It's an elder tree, it's a witch. You did put a cross in the mud when you closed the gate, didn't you? Or she will follow." And the farmer said that, alas, he did not. And they all went to open the window and looked at the cows in the pasture. And there, right in the pasture, illuminated by the light coming from their farm windows, was an elder tree. It was right there. And the farmer said, "Bolt the door." And the farmer's wife did. And then he said, "Go and get me that silver button which you sewed back on my Sunday suit." And the farmer went to go and get the silver button. She had already sewn it back on the suit, but she cut it off and gave it to the farmer. And he loaded it in his shotgun and went out. Under the count of three, Granny is in the corner of the room, sat by the fire. She's just picked up an iron shovel. Wife and daughter are by the door, and, they're going to unbolt it, and the farmer's going to run out there and shoot the elder tree with a silver bullet. He was shaking, though, mind. So they unbolted the door, and he went in and shot at the tree, but he was shaking so much that the silver bullet missed, and the tree came running with its branches like this towards the farmer, and he squealed like a pig and started to run back through the farm gate. His wife was ready to bolt the door, and just as she did so, the elder tree was coming, and she closed the door, bolted it. He got his coat stuck in it, and the tree was scratching at the door. Meanwhile, farmer's wife had got a whole shovel load of hot coals out of the fire grate, and she said, "The back door, open the back door." They could see the tree going past the windows round the back of the house, and farmer went, open the door. The elder tree was right there. Old Granny with a shovel load of hot coals flings it at the elder tree and goes up in flames and screams, goes running through the night and then collapses into a pile of ash. The next day, word went out to all of the word went out across the village, and news started coming back. What's the cunning woman that lives over by Lechlade? No, she's all right. Oh, can't be her. What about Black Annis? She was accused of cursing cattle a few years back. No, she's still alive. Oh, what about that kind old woman that just lives at the top of the hill there? Yep, she burnt to death in her fire last night. Well, the identity of the witch then was known. So that's a slightly scrappily told story called The Elder Tree Witch. I think that one was recorded by Catherine Briggs. I don't know. But that's a type of story often told about witches, where something is done to their familiar, usually a cat, or in this case, an elder tree, and then that happens to the cunning woman, the witch in question. Very, very, very common sort of story. In Christianity, the elder also has a role to play. Sometimes it's said to be the tree of Calvary because the cross of Jesus Christ was made from elder wood. Probably wasn't. It's also said to be the tree on which Judas Iscariot hung himself. Again, that's probably not literally. I don't want to be that literal guy because I'm a mythologist and there are mythological truths that are separate to literal historical truths. But having said that, the elder tree, I don't know whether it even grows in sort of, Israel, Palestine. Also, it's not a very good tree, as I've already said, for constructing things with. So I think it would probably snap if you tried to hang yourself by the neck until dead on the majority of elder trees. They're quite brittle. Going through the doorway now, elder to my side. So this is sort of a Christianization of earlier, probably pagan beliefs to try and incorporate an important tree into the Christian belief system, which I always find fascinating. I said at the beginning as well, it's very unlucky to burn elder wood. And if you do, the devil will appear in the room or sit on your roof. Again, probably an association with maybe some kind of underworld entity or otherworld entity in an earlier belief system that has now been gobbled up by the devil or Christian metaphysics. So it's really interesting that this tree has such kind of binary associations in the folklore, either to do with witchcraft and bad magic and sorcery, or gifts. And it's a very abundant tree. Just think of all the berries and all the blossoms. It gives us so much, maybe not in terms of its timber, but so many good things, but also lessons, also life lessons. The hardship that we sometimes endure as part of being a human being in the world is necessary, and out of it comes fresh new growth. So a tree of death, of suffering, but also regeneration and kindness, because perhaps those lessons are a blessing, a kindness in disguise. And that's sort of the wisdom that perhaps a mature woman that's the role of the mature woman in ancient and perhaps today's societies as well, is the passing on of wisdom, of knowledge, and how to turn hard life lessons into a positive. That's sort of the tacky psychological takeaway from this anyway. In the words of Carl Jung, there is no coming to consciousness except through pain. People imagine enlightenment is communicating with beings of white light, but no, according to Carl Jung, it's through making the darkness, through making the shadow conscious. That's how you achieve enlightenment. So that, you could say, is the lesson of the elder tree, the lessons of suffering and coming into the light. But it's all there in the symbology, in the folklore. So a tree probably with ancient associations of the divine feminine, of the goddess, but also of the underworld and the otherworld, the fairy realm. This is very much an eldritch tree. So that's all we've got time for today, my friends. Thank you to all my Patreons for all your support. See you next time, my friends. Thank you very much for watching. Ta-ta.